let's get straight into it, Max. So today we're talking on fear, what it means to go through it. Max, someone who I know has a few things to probably give into this conversation to kind of talk about, you know, maybe some times where you had faced fear when you did face a challenge like that, and then kind of see what was going through your mind, how you dealt with it. But first, why don't you share with us a little bit of a story, a time where fear was very prevalent? When I'm talking about fear, I should probably I'm not talking about like fear as in like, oh, you got a jump scare playing 5 Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah. I know. Almost like existential fear, you know, or like
a deeper fear.
Substantial. Yeah. So it was. I was away in Spain on a nice holiday right after a breakup. I'd been going out with someone for about a year, and I got back from Spain on the Thursday morning, and on the Friday, I dropped out of school early, so this is a bit of a weird thing for me to go to, but it was like at the end of high school, people kind of go out to a field and they celebrate, they get drunk, they whatever. You see people so it's people from like all of the neighbouring high schools in our area, so because I went to like a different high school to a lot of people that I went to primary school with, and then also the fact that I dropped out of high school early, it's like a whole bunch of people that like I knew from before, that like I hadn't spoke to in years, and someone invited me to it late, or like obviously it was like the week of oh, are you coming to this? And I was like, you know what, I might as well go to it. I think for me, like a lot of it was Reese being like newly single. I was like, I can do what I want now, like she would probably not want me to do this, so I'm gonna do it anyway. I think subconsciously I wasn't thinking that, you know what I mean, I wasn't like I'm only, so like I was just like, yeah, I want to go, but like it's 100% something that I like, if I was in a relationship, or if that ended like a month later, it probably wouldn't have ever happened, you know what I mean? It's one of those things, I was like, I'm a free man, I'm gonna go and meet old people and like celebrate whatever. So yeah, I decided to go out, meet my friends in this field. At first I showed up with a can of Monster, and everyone's like, you're not drinking? I was like, oh, I'm drinking energy juice, you know what I mean? Like I was like, no, I've got places to be, you know, like I've got to be home like at a reasonable time, so I'm not going to stay out too long. And then one of my mates is like, you know, I've got one drink. Oh, I'll have one drink. Okay, I'll have one drink. And then it's like, oh, well, give me a bit of that drink. Give me a bit of that drink. Blah 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 blah. So it got to a point where I would have been very drunk. Honestly, I don't really remember much from the night. This is why I struggle sharing this story a little bit, because the actual like worst aspect of it was when it's the parts that I don't remember. You know what I mean? So this is more of like, it's a story that happened to me, but in a sense, it almost feels like it didn't happen to me, because it was like more of an experience for my family than it was for me, if that makes sense, because they were all very conscious for it. So basically, one thing led to another. We don't really know what happened. I was very irresponsible and very drunk, and then I think at some point, some people say someone spiked something that I drank. Some people say that someone gave me it. No idea. Yeah, I'm passed out. People are like carrying me. My parents get phoned somehow, which is lucky, because I don't know, like there's happened to people there who knew like my family and stuff. And when they get there, I'm pale, white, completely knocked out, foaming at the mouth, and like eyes rolling back in my head, and taking a reaction to something, basically, like something not very normal. And like everyone who was there said like it looked like I was gonna die, basically. So, and this is where it's like, everyone else, this was probably really scary for them, but for me it didn't happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I say it didn't happen, it obviously did happen, but I didn't experience this, so to me it didn't happen. Like if I had woken up and no one had told me that had happened, I would have never known, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wake up at like 9 o'clock at night. So this was like a midday thing, and I wake up at night in the hospital. Yeah, everyone, my grandparents and my parents are there, and basically fill me in with what had happened. And it was funny actually, because this didn't even really get to me. This was like, again, because it wasn't my experience, so it didn't really affect me that much. I was like, but I was like, well, that's crazy. I'm like, I don't remember anything, and I've never been like that before, you know what I mean? I'd never had drank so much that like, because I don't do that, you know what I mean? So this was the first time that I'd gotten so drunk that I like couldn't remember things, and I was like, this is, so in that sense it was kind of scary, you know what I mean? But I was like, so I was messaging my friends like, what did I do, like did anything happen, like blah blah blah. Luckily nothing really was nothing crazy, right? So they're like, no, you're totally fine, like just like everyone was like, oh, are you okay? And it took me, so I don't know how much like details, so like to go into, it doesn't really matter. The whole point was that it looked really bad. So for my dad, like driving behind the ambulance from the field to the hospital, and not knowing like if I'd be alive on the other side of it. So I guess that's kind of like the most of the fear aspect was kind of from him, and like my family that were watching and stuff. So
yeah,
I kind of, that put my dad was like wanting to like, what happened? I need to know like who did this and what happened, and how did you get like that? Like you must remember, like I mean, so it was like the days after were quite mentally heavy. So it was like like my dad was like, I can't, like so upset that like, that's to be fair, he thought I was gonna die. So
What was
it was
that?
getting over that.
What was that like? Because I imagine that would have been like there must have been a fear to that of not knowing. Like I feel like the fear in that for you must have been knowing that you were so close to dying, yet you have no recollection of it. Yet everyone
Yeah.
else's reactions is like that must have been a weird feeling.
No, it definitely was. It was like for that whole Friday. So it happened on Friday and the whole Saturday. I had a haircut, I think, on the Saturday. So I went for a haircut on the Saturday, and I was still like, but everything felt like fake. You know what I mean? Like it was such a bizarre time. Like waking up and just constantly talking to my dad about like what had happened, and he's trying to like for him, he just wants to get to the bottom of it because he's like, I need to find out who did this to you or like what happened. You know what I mean? So it was hard for that because it was hard to see. You know, your dad's like kind of meant to be the you're like a bit of an anchor in your life. You know what I mean? Like a strong. You know what I mean? Like how Jesus is a rock. Your dad's kind of like the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like seeing like him so emotional and stuff. Like I've seen him emotional at like weddings or whatever, but like.
Yeah, no, it was different.
Seeing him so hurt by that was obviously the hardest part for me, was like people's reactions to it. Yeah, that was kind of the main thing for me. And then Sunday in church. So this is the weird thing. So this is how we kind of knew that it wasn't like a typical just a hangover, or like I didn't just like drink too much. You know what I mean? Because it was the Saturday I was getting my hair cut and I was rambling about nonsense and I don't really remember much of it. Went around the whole day like a zombie, and then the Sunday, even in church, I remember sitting in the chair in church. My dad I think he told the church that Sunday about what happened and how it's been like there was a reason he told them. I think it was just like,
I think there was a few things going on at that time, and that was like
a few things going on. The main thing was also, I think, to make sure that people heard it from him, and then there wasn't like a bunch of rumors going around about, oh, did you hear about the pastor's kid, whatever. So I think there was a part of it that was that. But I remember like sitting there in the chair in church, and like I was like, my head was falling back. So I'm like, I was on this like weird like come down from it for like the whole weekend, where I just felt totally weird. And then I had a friend's wedding on the Monday. Well, in fact, I actually had a driving lesson on the Monday. So I think it was the Monday. I had a wedding at night. I was meant to go clothes shopping on the Saturday to get like clothes for it because I didn't have any. It was kind of late. Obviously, I didn't get to do that on Saturday, so my mum was gonna take me and my sister to the fort, and then we went clothes shopping. The fort is a shopping centre. It's not really important. So we went to go get some clothes for that evening, and my friends were coming to my house at like 4 p.m. Because we were gonna carpool there. So they were all making their way to my house. I was making my way back from the clothes shop, and I think for me, I was already kind of on edge, so I was like, and I felt like this is where it's not really important, but I was super on edge, and I think my mom was very like unwell at this time as well, and she was kind of tired, and I kept feeling like her like wheels that coming off the road, so I was like dead like something's gonna happen here, and then at one point her left wheels came off the road, and I was like, oh, I freaked out, and I was like, Mom, and then she freaked out because I freaked out, tried to overcorrect it. Because we were in a big crossover SUV, high center of gravity, crashed into the wall and like toppled over on its side. So I don't know what speed we were going. I don't really remember much details about it. I remember like being in the moment and being like, I was like, I think the first thing I said, I was like, are you serious? Like, did that actually just happen? Like, I'm like, what's going on? And I think just right after like the kind of traumatic experiences of the Friday, just having that happen on the Monday as well was like crazy. So yeah, I'm sitting there like with my window shattered and my face like almost touching the ground, and my mum's dangling like, because she's obviously in the driver's seat, so she's kind of just hanging from her seatbelt on top of me kind of. So, and I'm just looking around, but this is so bizarre, and I couldn't think straight, you know what I mean? I already could hardly think straight because I was still like shook from the Friday before. Yeah, I remember like one of our phones started calling the police just on the automatic like crash detector. My sister's phoning the police, and I'm talking to them at the same time. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know where we are. I'm like, we've just crashed like on the way home. But I'm like, they're like, where are you? I'm like, I don't know where I am. But the thing for me as well, we were on a bend as well, so I'm just thinking we need to get out of this car. Eventually, we get one of the windows open, and like we kind of like look out, we see everyone stopped, so we can stop panicking. People help us out the car, and we see it, and it looks like such a like bad scene. But like, and I think my sister had a bit of whiplash just to her not having a seatbelt on, which she's learned her lesson from. But yeah, and like the most I had was like a little cut on the side of my hand from like glass, just from, obviously because the window shattered. So that was like, you know what I mean, to get out of it. Have you seen the photo of it? Like to get a few scratches, you know what I mean?
It was a bad accident. It looked really bad. I remember.
And I remember having to like phone my dad, and I'm like, he's gonna be so like, I don't want to phone him because I don't think he had a car on him either. because his car was so like he didn't have a car, and his only thing was his motorbike, and I'm like, I don't want to phone him because he's gonna get on his motorbike and get over here, and he'll be like so full of adrenaline. Like we don't want him, you know what I mean? I was like, I can't do that. I can't phone him. But eventually I did phone him. I was like, Dad, don't freak out. And he's like, obviously it's like the worst thing to say. I was like, after the weekend that we'd had with that, I was like, Dad, don't freak out, but we've crashed, but it's fine. It's fine. You don't need to come out. It's fine. He's like, no, I'm getting there now. I'm like, Dad, it's fine, you know. But eventually, like, he does get there. And I'm kind of like quite composed up until this point. Like I've been like, I think the first thing I got out was like, oh, Maran, like, you can't be serious, man. We crashed. I was like, oh, this is so ridiculous. Like I was being quite like chill about it, making jokes as you do. And then it was just, we were sitting on the ambulance with my sister because she was uncomfortable in the ambulance. So, and they're being like, oh, you need to stay really still, because she told them that she didn't have a seatbelt on. They're being super careful, which is their job. They're meant to be like that. But she didn't like that. So I was sitting there like to like calm her down. And then my dad gets there, so I get off the ambulance and just give him a hug straight away, and then we both just started crying, you know what I mean? So that was kind of like that's when it set in, you know what I mean? And he was like, Satan's trying to kill you, you know what I mean? So
and for context for people, because that sounds quite extreme, right? But for context to people, I know this isn't to scare people and to say that Satan will try and kill you, right? But these are two experiences in this matter of a weekend. But throughout your life, Max has had multiple throughout my childhood near-death experiences. I don't know, you're like a magnet for them. It's not saying that over you, but I'm just saying, I mean,
it's not like crazy. I think when you break, like before you didn't really think about it, and after those two things kind of happened, like that, it did kind of, I was like, okay, to be fair, yeah, when you think about it, there's definitely, like, I don't know about, because I even forgot about some, but there's just been a lot of like things that like definitely could have
those were definitely the two that I remember putting that whole idea into perspective. I think I remember you like in our families more specifically being like, okay, we need to actually intercede in this, and we need to pray for this, because this is happening too much. Right, coming from that, I want to know then what happened with your relationship with God. Like how did this affect your relationship with God?
Well, I think it goes deeper than that as well. So this happened, like, I think it did set in that there was like something, I was like, evidently there's some sort of calling on my life. So initially it was like, okay, super strong, now I need to lock in so that like I make sure that I'm following that calling, because there's obviously something that God's wanting to use me for, otherwise Satan wouldn't be so scared, you know what I mean? That kind of, so like I think initially it was actually pretty like good. I was like, I've made these mistakes, but I can learn from them and, you know what I mean, move on. So I think I was fine initially, but eventually, like, I think it was maybe the Friday thing obviously scared me, but I think it was maybe like a month or less before I was like at another gaff drinking again, you know what I mean? So that summer of 2024, I didn't even like, I was just kind of still like getting out. I think it was almost kind of like trying to numb the pain of like the breakup, and then the near-death experiences. And it was just like, I'm just gonna have fun, you know what I mean, like hang out with my friends and go to gaffs and whatever. Like it was like a house party for any American or English sphere, so like going to house parties and stuff, and trying to like pull girls and stuff like that. So just to be honest, that summer wasn't like a very, so I would say like the initial response was, okay, I really need to lock in with God, but then that's not what I did, you know what I mean? So the initial like response to them happening was get closer with God, but then that's not what I did. So like it was really, I mean, I think I can
imagine, I mean, I don't want to speak for you. I can imagine though that fear of knowing, like, because you're saying you recognize that clearly there's some reason that God's wanting to use you for, but like you also recognizing that that's maybe why these attacks are coming. And so I imagine there could be a human side, because I know I've been in this position myself, where I've recognized if I'm doing well, if my relationship with God is doing well, then like Satan's not gonna like that, and you know, there might be some, you know, there are going to be attacks, because that's one thing we're told in scriptures, that, you know, it's not just because we make a decision for God, just because we follow him, life isn't going to be easy. And so I don't know if maybe there was a part of that for you that could have been in a part, I think, in those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I haven't really like stopped to think about that, like my long-term reaction to that for quite a while. Like, so it definitely could be deeper than that, because I think a lot of times if you don't stop to think about what was I doing in that situation, then you won't think about stuff like that. It's definitely a possibility of like just being scared of like if that's what's going to happen, I don't want, like, then I'm scared and I'm going to, you know what I mean? So it brings
Yeah.
that fear into it. It's like,
100%.
okay, if God wants to use me and that means I'm going to die,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? So, but I think like what was like going on was like, I think I was just trying to like distract myself, from what had happened and like the actual weight of it.
So I was going to ask, so what was
Yeah.
then the thing that kind of got you back in line with God and your relationship with God?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like,
Don't worry too
because
much if you
obviously,
don't
like, at the end of that year, like, I had a big, like, panic attack in church and then continued to struggle with anxiety for, like, the first half of last year. Well, more than the first half, really. So, like, then I had this, it was, like, before I could have a chance to kind of settle in, I also got hit with this, like, other thing of, like, the anxiety, which people were like, you know, you start to struggle with anxiety and people start telling you, like, what could possibly be you know what I mean, people try and speculate, so they're like, oh well, maybe it's all these things that have happened to you this year, like they're really getting to you now, you know, like, or it's like just piling up and then it's like snapped or whatever. But I was like, I don't know what it is, but I wasn't really thinking about it that hard. I was like, I just need to deal with it, get on with my life. So, but I mean, like, it was bad enough to the point where I couldn't drive like certain distances without stopping. So like that was now this new challenge that maybe stemmed from the traumatic events that had happened in that year, that then I was like not dealing with them, so it just kind of built up and I just kept having like not crippling anxiety, but like anxiety to the point where it was getting in the way of my life a bit, you know what I mean? I think the main thing with so I can't really put like a stop to like, or when did the anxiety attack stop. I get them like occasionally, right? But like it used to be every day, so it's just constant prayer for that, I think, was the main thing. Like it wasn't even like, I don't think I ever got like, I maybe did ask for prayer once or twice from like other people, but I think the main thing, like, I was just like constantly, every time it happened I was praying, you know what I mean? So I think that almost kind of like made me talk to God more, the fact, because it was like every day
where you had to rely on him.
Yeah, so like every day on the way to college it was just like, God, please do that, like I need to get through this, like just praying for strength and praying for like calmness and stuff like that. So but it was like wrestling with God almost, because as well at the same time I'm sitting and like my worst nightmare would be like a set of like temporary traffic lights and a bat, so you know what I mean, so I'm sitting, this would happen a lot of times. One time I remember it was on the way through like Bishop Briggs and Torrance and Kirky or whatever, like I think it was like between Torrance and Kirky, and I'm sitting in my car and it's at a standstill and I can see that the traffic is going for like miles ahead and it's just sitting still, and I'm sitting and I'm having like a panic attack and I'm hitting like hitting my steering wheel and stuff like that, because I'm like, I just don't know what to do. So like that's what I would do. I would be like, God, why? I was, you know what I mean? It's like shouting. I'm like, what's going on? It was like an actual, I was raging, but I'm sorry. Like, I need. So it's like battling between that. So I was like fighting with God over it, if that makes sense.
But there's a misconception sometimes. I mean, that's a bad thing. But I actually think that we need to wrestle with God. You know, I think He just wants us. You know, I've said it before. Like, I think it's important that we go to Him with everything, when we're doing well, when we're doing bad. I think actually a lot of the Psalms are people, David as well, like going to God, like wrestling with Him, like, I'm struggling, I'm maybe even angry, but yet you're still God. I'm still choosing to go to you with this anger. I'm still choosing to go to you with this stuff. Well, that's
I think that was it.
Yeah. So what then, Max, finishing off, would you have any practical advice for people that maybe are stuck in a feeling of anxiety or fear, that maybe have that thing in their life that is maybe keeping them from God?
Well, obviously, for me, I would just say, like, definitely don't, like, I know I say, like, I was tried to just keep going on at it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, so I wouldn't try not to let it get in the way of what you're doing, because if you give it power, then it's way harder to get out of. So, like, I would say, and don't stop praying and don't stop talking to God, you know what I mean? Like, that's the main thing, really, for me, is what helped, is that I never stopped trying to talk to God about it, if that makes sense. Yeah. There was times where I would just be like, okay, well, the next step is just learning to live with this, instead of, because I'm like, I'm never going to get over it, so I'll just need to adjust my life to, but like, so like, don't get in that mindset, but it will happen. You will get stuff like that if you're struggling with that, but it's just more about not letting that be the only thing you think, you know what I mean? So I would definitely say just keep praying about it.
Thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
I think that's kind of covered it.
Thank you, Max, for sharing.
Don't be afraid to get counselling.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, but you know what I mean? We all probably should.
Don't be afraid to go to God. Don't be afraid to bring it to God. Yeah. I think it's, I mean, I don't know. Well, actually, if I can add one thing to what you're saying, Max, from what I've seen from you, what I've experienced, is that I think as well, you started submitting yourself to God more. You started pulling out, I feel like you started pulling out of things church related, you started pulling out of things faith related, but then I think eventually you started just submitting despite the fear, despite the anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I shared about before how I dealt with illness, right? I dealt with illness that took me out of, I stopped serving in church for 2 years because I was dealing with the illness, and I still am ill, right? And I remember this season where Max was dealing with this stuff, but I remember Max's reaction to it wasn't to pull out necessarily, or at least there was a time when he was shaky with it, but he just kept powering through, and Max just kept serving, and he kept just submitting to God. And that was impactful to me, because I was like, if my brother's doing it, why can't I do that even though I'm ill? And I think your decision to keep serving faithfully and to keep just worshiping, especially now, like Max is in a great place now obviously, but the way he just the fact now that you just fully submit, I feel like, to God, and just give your everything to him in worship. When you lead worship, I think that's a powerful thing, and I think giving him your yes even though you feel those things is a big step in the right direction for anyone dealing with fear and anxiety.